In my work, I strive to look at the whole notion of equity and the notion of equitable responses to students and teaching students or working with students equitably. I pay a difference between equality and equity. The equity for me means not treating students the same, paying attention to their differences, taking into account the gendered ways in which they come and understand the world, racial, ethnic, linguistic ways of all these things, and that means you're treating students equitably, not treating them the same. Equality tends to be where we treat them the same because we assume that since all the students are in the same classes, I'm giving them the same opportunities, therefore I should treat them in the same way. That doesn't get at equity. And so I see the difference as absolutely important if you're going to treat students equitably and help them maintain and their interest in schooling, participate equitably in schooling, and engage in a teaching learning process in which they learn what they what they wish for them to learn, to understand their space in the society, understand and able to use and exercise their agency so that they attain that which they set out to attain. Addressing student voice is absolutely critical if we're going to treat students equitably. It also means inviting students to be part of the learning process. I know typically we always assume the group of students we're going to get, and we really sit in our offices or wherever and write a curriculum ready for students and to go into class all prepared to teach the students when we know nothing about them. I always remember when I taught undergraduate urban education, one of the things I would insist as one of the first assignment is for teacher candidates to walk around the community, look at where the baseball diamond is, what facilities exist in the schoolyard, look at the kinds of houses around the school, look at the business in the neighborhood, see how often the bus comes and where the bus stop is located. Paying attention to all these because that gives us a sense of the community and gives us a sense of what the students are dealing with and who the students are, and paying attention to what is their latest newspaper article that's written about the students in that community. All that should be incorporated into developing the knowledge of the students and developing a sense of the neighborhood and developing a sense of what I might have to take into account as I prepare to teach the students and as I prepare to pay attention to the materials I have to use to respond to students' needs. In that way, we not treating students culturally the same, because a student living in a particular neighborhood might be of a particular ethnic or racial background, but that community in which that student resides influences him or her in a particular way. So I need to take that in consideration. So I cannot take information from one neighborhood to the other without paying attention to, I did change neighborhoods and I need to connect with that neighborhood. So place and space are very, very important as we think about being culturally responsive to students' needs and students' work. The other thing that I also find important is paying attention to intersectionality. I'm sometimes ambivalent at times how intersectionality is used, because if we enter the issue with a gendered frame, sometimes we do not we sometimes forget, and because of who we are, we sometimes are so located in that gendered space, like a male or a racial space, And yet we will say, oh yes, and there's gender and ethnicity and language and sexuality, etc., etc. But we do not integrate it. We just simply add it as yet all those things are important and we pay attention to. If we're going to be really think intersectionally, we're going to have to integrate and not add on. York University is located next to the community Jane Finch, and York has always had a relationship with Jane Finch. So we had developed this relationship with Jane Finch, and we were interested in looking at the issues related to black students and to help them to be more engaging, to let them think of the options post-high school, to think of university as a possibility, or just simply thinking of how they can be good participants in their own journey towards whatever they wish for in life. In doing so, we worked with the schools and had what we call a summer institute. That summer institute is where we bring teachers, youth workers, parents, community people, school administrators. We invite ministry people to it. In other words, what we're saying, the students are not only going into the classroom, but students have a whole big world, and all of us as people who work with students are responsible for the students, and therefore we should have conversation with each other. Some of us are doing research with the students, some of us are teaching the students, some of us are parenting the student, some of us are youth workers trying to help them understand the world in which they want to occupy. And some of us are mentors to the student. So the Summer Institute is an attempt to bring all those people in their various roles in conversation with each other. So that and we usually have it at least 1 or 2 weeks before school starts. And so at that time, when they go back to school, there is a conversation that the teachers would have had, the youth workers would have had, and exchanges about the youth. We're working with the same students after all, the same young people. So the Summer Institute enables those opportunities and those possibilities. It also enables the possibility of thinking beyond just simply the classroom as the only space that education takes place. And the school is the only space that education takes place. I also like the idea of having people to think about an interconnected world, rather than I only live in this community, but everything else around, even beyond my community, is affecting me. So I always pay attention to beyond the individual, there are the structures that inform the individual. So if I talk of racism, it's not only about these individual racism, but think about how policies, programs, these structural things also have racist undertones, and therefore inform and influence the possibilities and operate as barriers to young people and to parents and all these other things. I also think it's important to also have students think of critical hope. I like the notion of critical hope, because you wonder, if we think of the society as unequal or inequitable, if we think that racism exists, if we think that sexism, classism, homophobia, all these are going to be barriers that operate, how can we create in young people the idea that you can still be successful when they have so many evidence around them that constantly show them that the barriers could beat them down? So we want to create a hope in these young people, and to be able to think that there are possibilities. What we need to give them is that sense of hope, that sense of possibility.